a core part of self-actualization is not fulfilling some kind of sense of lack, but coming more into wholeness within yourself, being more fully yourself, integrating more and more parts of yourself. And this is a huge paradigm shift for most people, because we're typically in our life trying to fulfill our deficiency needs for food, sex, money, connection, approval, things like this, which there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff whatsoever, right? I would actually urge you to integrate that stuff in a healthy way. So when self-actualization comes along and it starts to turn the tables or flip the script, it's like this huge jump for the mind, actually. It's like you're reorienting yourself. So self-actualization is a higher stage of consciousness. It's a higher stage of human development that transcends survival needs, but also includes them. So a self-actualized individual still eats food or makes money or has connections. It's just that the mind has a certain amount of its needs met at this point, so that it can be relatively detached from survival and go beyond it. It's not needy, it's not grasping, it's not clinging. It's a significantly more conscious and healthier mind. So there's a sense of stillness, there's a sense of inner integration and wholeness, there's a sense of stability and presence, not because of anything external, but because of how the mind has developed. So it's a far healthier way of being in the world. So in this video, I want to share a lot of insights about what self-actualization really is. Because when we hear about self-actualization, we're typically just kind of confused about it. It's like this very vague, reaching our full potential. And in this video, I want to really paint a clear image about what self-actualization truly is. And there's actually levels of development past self-actualization. It's called self-transcendence. I'll be making another video about that in the future. For now, I hope you guys enjoy my hair and my new fit. So, self-actualized people see reality more clearly because they're not trapped in their deficiency needs. Basically, deficiency needs are things that we need in order to survive, and we're usually fulfilling them from a place of lack. So we need more food, we need more money, we need more sex, we need more connection, we need more approval. And there's really nothing wrong with this stuff. It's just that when we are not at the self-actualized level of development and we're stuck, right? Keyword here is when we're stuck within these needs. Our minds begin to skew reality in such a way so that we can get those needs met. We become very biased and distorted in our worldview so that it serves our personal survival. And once you're able to self-actualize, you can begin to go back and look at all that stuff and sort of like reorganize yourself in such a way so that you are a more pure human. What I mean by that is you've like cleaned yourself up of your delusions and a lot of your neuroses. Right? This is very hard work, actually. This is not like an easy thing to do. This requires a lot of time, attention, and effort, really. It's very intentional. It's not a hard work in the sense that it's a grind and it's a pain, but it's very, very intentional, and it can be very uncomfortable at times. Brings up a lot of emotions. So self-actualized individuals are less likely to distort their perceptions due to personal biases and needs, because there's a certain amount of needs that have been met, and this stable foundation allows them to go beyond that and into self-actualization. So a self-actualized individual can still make money, have sex, food, connection, approval, etc. It's just that now there's a sort of detachment from it because they're not so needy for it for their own survival. Now they can step back and they can view life in a more clear way because they're not so dependent upon it for their survival. They feel safe and secure enough to be able to do this. Their minds organically evolve to this stage of development, and it's really just completely organic, actually. This is very natural for the human mind to progress in this fashion. So next, there's a deeper acceptance of self, others, and nature. Self-actualized people see themselves and others as they are, with their flaws, their imperfections. They're also able to accept the natural world, including the inevitabilities of life, such as aging and death. There's just this deeper acceptance of life, and they usually think more long-term. And not just think, but they act in a way Their being expresses itself in a way that is more strategic, not in a hyperlogical way, but in a way that's, in a sense, more regulated, more grounded. They don't overexert energy, right? They have this more like Taoist, sort of like Buddhist style approach to even achieving their goals. There's a lack of attachment to outcome, which I'll be explaining a little bit of that later. So there's this deeper acceptance of self. There's this lack of struggling against yourself, and because of this, suffering greatly reduces, right? Unnecessary psychological, emotional suffering greatly reduces. And they're able to accept others. They can see others more clearly. They can just relate to life in a more accurate and functional and overall healthy way. They don't have this need to push away death. In fact, self-actualized people will probably be the kinds of people to contemplate their death just as a way to really come into contact with the present experience, just to thrust them into the present experience, because this is all they really have, and they know that. They know this right here. This is the magic of life. Right? Moving on, there's a sense of spontaneity, simplicity, and naturalness. That sense of childlike playfulness and spontaneity can really be a major aspect of certain self-actualized people. Right? So this reflects, this kind of spontaneous, natural simplicity to them reflects a very organic aspect of them. Right? There's not a bunch of clutter. That's what it really means by simplicity. There's not this like need for excess. There's just this like returning to oneself. So it's this simplicity, but it's in a sense complicated before reaching self-actualization, before being at that developmental level. So self-actualized people can be more spontaneous, but not in a chaotic way, but in a manner that is genuine and authentic, because authentic expression is spontaneous. It's happening in the moment. There's a sense of presence and connection to the moment. It's not spontaneous as in stupid. It's spontaneous as in like connected to the continuous flow of life and the present experience and themselves. It's this connected and present sort of way of being. So it often appears childlike. Right? You know, children who just really spontaneously express themselves in this sort of open, organic way. That sort of level and depth of authenticity returns because a self-actualized person is very repressed. There's usually layers of repression that hold a lot of that stuff down, and normal people, most people, are simply too repressed to actually express themselves in that way, to like really feel, safe to do that, right? And of course, who you're expressing yourself to matters as well. It has to be another, safe individual. But I want you to just keep in mind that when you reach a more self-actualized level of consciousness, there's this openness. It's really hard to repress yourself. It's hard to repress emotion. It's hard to repress feeling. It's hard to repress your natural instincts, your most authentic and deepest instincts. It's simply too uncomfortable. It actually requires a lot of energy to just habitually repress yourself. And self-actualized people see that and they feel that very clearly, and they stop doing it. Like, why would I do that? So self-actualized people focus a lot on problems outside of themselves, not as in a way to escape themselves, but usually because a lot of their problems, in a sense, have been solved, not in the sense where, they never focus on a problem ever again in their life, in their personal life, but in the sense that so many of their needs have been fulfilled that they can move beyond themselves. This is where real selflessness comes in. Their mind is evolved enough to the point where it can really start to help others in such a way, and this actually comes back to help them in such a way. So it's not this endless giving, but it's more calculated in the sense that it aligns with them. It instinctually feels right. So they can be focused on pretty large, big picture issues. They're often systems thinkers. They see the larger picture because, like I said, they can actually zoom out. They're not so involved with everything. They're not grasping and clinging and forcing everything. They can kind of zoom out and let go and just see a bigger picture, see a larger whole, aka systems thinking. And they can see how different parts of a system relate to one another. Right? So they're able to really be motivated by this sense of, in a sense, mission as well. Right? Not to like save the world or anything like that, but just like this intrinsic calling of like really wanting to bring truth, love, connection, consciousness really, to the world. This is like a trait that's almost basically universal within self-actualized people. So their goals usually go beyond just personal gain. They address, larger issues, global issues. Right? So their concerns are not limited to just themselves. Their concerns, and this really begins to flower at the self-transcendence level of development, their concerns are able to move beyond themselves, but it's really not this sort of cartoonish way of giving, where it's like you're just endlessly giving and you just have endless amounts to give. It's more aligned with them. It doesn't leave them feeling drained or exhausted. They have strong boundaries with the external world as well. Self-actualized people are hard to exploit and manipulate because they're so connected to themselves and clear and conscious. They're way harder to exploit. Low consciousness people are very easy to exploit because they're usually living in a lot of fear, significantly more fear. So a lot of self-actualized people, this moves on to the fifth point, have this need for privacy and solitude. They actually enjoy being alone. There's a sense of just pure peace, not in the sense where they can't connect with other people or they lack an ability to. They've developed that capacity within themselves. It's just they're doing it as an opportunity for reflection, for creativity, for rest. And they do it without feeling lonely. So there's an ability to really just be by oneself and be okay with it, while also connecting to other people, right? So it's not like you're just someone who sits by themselves all day, 24/7, and that's it, and you lack social skills. It's really not that whatsoever. It's that they have a desire for reflection, for study, for meditation, for really becoming conscious. They're very dedicated to their lifelong learning and their overall long-term development. This is a massive aspect of their lives typically. Next, there's a sense of autonomy and independence from culture and environment. These kinds of people are more directed by their intrinsic motivation, and they have begun to do a lot of psychological work that begins to drift them away from culture and external influences to the point where they can really reconnect to their own inner voice, rather than just external expectations and judgments from the outside. They're directed by their own inner values. They're directed by their own intrinsic motivation. They have far less of a need for external validation, and their actions are guided by personal principles and an intrinsic sense of really what they should be doing. Next is continued freshness of appreciation. This basically means that simple things are beautiful to the self-actualized psyche, like this water bottle or a blade of grass. Typically, we take all of life for granted, and not only that, we think we know what all of life is. Self-actualized people are able to begin letting go of the known, and they embrace the mystery of life. They let go of their concepts and their preconceived ideas about what their experience is, and they just embrace it. They just witness it with pure, just full presence and awareness, and all of life becomes mysterious, because in actuality, you don't really know what any of this stuff is. You have ideas and labels for everything and experience. You don't know what it is beyond what your mind continuously tells you that it is. Self-actualized people can detach from thought and move into being or existence or direct experience. Most people are struggling with this because their mind has to be so active so that they can get their needs met. And then even if they have their needs met, no one has ever really helped them or taught them how to move beyond that and into self-actualization. So this allows them to have this childlike sense of awe. You know that awe that you feel when you look up into the stars at night, right? And there's just that sense of openness and awe. A self-actualized person can feel that staring at a blade of grass. I can feel that staring at a pencil or any object, anything that just exists. Not because of what it is, but just because of the fact that it exists, that it is what it is. It's such a magnificent thing. Right? There's this sense of deep mystery and wow, oh my God, that just arises from this sort of sense of appreciation. And not just sense of appreciation, right? I want to use a little bit of a better word, but it's this radical letting go of everything that you believe you know. And just this moving into just pure presence. Speaking of which, this brings me to the next point, the mystic experience, or just mystical experiences, peak experiences. This is basically heightened awareness, heightened creativity, very deep intuition and insight. And it's this sort of moment of transcendence that transcends life, but also connects them to life. It's this transcending of the world, but including it. It's this sort of stepping back to observe, but also fully feeling and being grounded within the ever-changing flow of life. People at this level of development, their ego is usually a lot more open. Right? They're less repressed, like I've been saying, so it's easier for them to have transcendent experiences, which then moves them slowly into self-transcendence. Next is just this sense of community feeling. There's this instinctual sense of like being connected to humanity as a whole, finding a spiritual sense of connection to humanity and really opening up your heart to humanity. Self-actualized people typically have a very open heart. That seems to be a major characteristic of self-actualization. And it's not, like I said, it's not this sort of like hippy-dippy, like continuous giving, endless giving, right? There's also a set of strong boundaries that occurs so that they're not giving their energy to just anyone all the time. It's like aligned with them and their values, and they don't, it's like calculated. They're in touch with themselves, so they know when they're giving too much and they're able to like pull back when it's needed. Next is just interpersonal relations. Self-actualized people are way more authentic. This is really where authenticity begins to begin to flower. It really flowers at self-transcendence. But this is where people can really just open up and have a sense of softness within their body. When people are being authentic, there's this sense of softness within their being. When people are acting from the ego, there's this like hardened rigidity and defensiveness, and like this waiting for things to go wrong approach, and like this wanting of just approval and grasping and clinging and manipulating. Self-actualized people can really just let go. Right? So they actually also seek relationships based off of mutual values as well, higher values. So because of this, people who are self-actualized can form very, very, very deep bonds with people that unfortunately most people have never experienced. Because self-actualized people, makes up maybe around 5% to 7% of the population, and self-transcended people is less than 1%. So we're talking about, at best, maybe 93% of humanity never being at this level of development. But in the future, right, there's going to be more and more and more and more people. Humanity slowly raises its consciousness over time. Next is this sort of democratic character structure of self-actualized people. They're very open-minded and they respect basically everyone. And I really mean everyone, like everyone. There's this sense of understanding, because usually the self-actualized person has collected all these perspectives. They've read developmental psychology, science, spirituality, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity. They understand, in a sense, like how criminals work as well. The most like hated people, they actually see things within those people and within their psyche that the ordinary person completely misses. So like I said, a self-actualized person can see reality in this more fresh and clearer way, because they're less, in a sense, diluted by personal biases and personal needs. So they're actually able to respect basically everyone of different backgrounds and cultures and things like this. And they're not like hippy-dippy about it either. They're not delusional. They know certain systems work better than others. Because like I said, they're systems thinkers. They're not like foolish. They know certain paths work better than others. They're not like overly relativistic. But there's this deep accepting and this deep integrating of hundreds, thousands of really different points of view. Very open-minded people. Right. There's also this really, really profound aspect, and they're able to basically distinguish means and ends. Right? A lot of people use things as a means to an end to get a goal, basically, and they're fixated on the goal. The self-actualized person treats everything as an end onto itself. It has a sense of connection and flow with life, right? It can create a goal, they can create a goal, but there's this lack of like grasping and clinging and attachment to the goal, but still an ability to move with life towards the goal. It's not this hustle grind set garbage, basically. It's this sense of connection and flow and presence with life that really drives their behavior, rather than this force every day. You see all the time, hustle, grind, all this stuff. It's forceful. Self-actualized person moves with life in this sort of Taoist-like fashion. Next is a very philosophical mind, really, and this very unhostile sense of humor. So their humor itself is thoughtful and often very philosophical, and it's not hostile at the expense of other people. And their humor actually reflects their deep understanding of human nature. So in a sense, they can use humor to enlighten and connect rather than to demean and ridicule. And their jokes often have profound insights and just a different quality to them as well. Next is creativeness. They're extremely creative. These people are more connected to the very source of existence, of just pure consciousness. And really everyone and everything is pure conscious, but they're more aligned with it. They're more aware of it. They're simply more open and less repressed, which allows them to be more creative and allows them to become conscious of really the nature of their own existence. So creativity is a natural expression of self-actualization. This creativity is not limited to artistic expression, but is evident in their approach to life itself. It's a really good quote. It's a Zen quote. I'm not going to quote it perfectly here, but there's basically two ways to wash the dishes. You can wash them to have clean dishes, or you can just wash the dishes. And one implies fixating on a goal, and then the other one implies like being with life, connecting with life. Right? And this is an example of like a very creative way of just existing. And really, when you reach these higher levels of development, me personally, it's really hard to repress myself. It's really hard to repress my emotions, my felt sense of connection to myself. It's just not worth it. It's not seen as worth it, ever, really. There's no forcing for an outcome. There's no forcing for a particular goal. That's just not really how the mind works at these levels of development. There's just this deeper sense of like trust in the flow of life, and an ability to just kind of stay with that, because it's the only thing that is really here. There's only this present experience, this ability to connect and be present and move with life, while also having a vision of like goals that you want, right? All that typical human stuff doesn't go anywhere, but it's just that it's all reframed, right? And you bring these higher aspects into the lower aspects, into the food you eat, into how you make money, into your relationships, into how you connect with people, right? So you bring the higher needs into the lower needs. Don't be too dualistic about this notion. Next is just resistance to any particular culture. It's this transcendence of any particular culture. So a lot of people will be like, Christianity's the one true way, and then no, it's this religion, or no, it's this science and this branch of science and this scientific theory, right? It's just anti-dogma. The self-actualized person, like I said, has studied so many hundreds of different perspectives: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, physics, philosophy, biology, chemistry, Christianity, different forms of psychotherapy, right? Hundreds of perspectives. So their mind is kind of like this kaleidoscope that can see reality from one perspective. They take off, the lens that they're looking at it through. They look at it through another lens, right? And oh, it's like this. Take it off and they look at it like this. So they're becoming more construct aware of how their perspective affects really what they believe reality is. And they're able to also let go of perspective entirely, but this specific thing doesn't really flower until self-transcendence. So self-actualized people focus on being values. This is basically truth, beauty, goodness, wholeness, aliveness, uniqueness, and perfection, but not perfection in a perfectionistic way. Perfection as in how you sort of like relate to life. Seeing life itself as perfect. Moving out of the entire paradigm of problems existing whatsoever, while also being able to have the point of view of problems existing. Because the problems existing paradigm is actually something that your mind uses in order to survive. Very useful to perceive problems and try and fix them. I have no food, problem. I have no partner, problem, right? I have a job I hate, problem. So a self-actualized person can let go of the whole problem paradigm, but also include it. So it's not ignorance, it's actually transcendence and including. So these are intrinsic values that go beyond the basic needs of survival and even social acceptance. So then this is basically distinct from deficiency needs, which are basically needs for security, love, esteem, money, sex, connection, things like this. Nothing wrong with that. The self-actualized person has integrated all of this stuff, and once again, they've brought their consciousness into how they go about doing all these things. So they're more likely to own more conscious businesses, have more conscious relationships, be more conscious of the food that they eat, right? Is the water filtered or is it tap water with heavy metals in it, right? So next, there's self-transcendence, which is the stage past self-actualization. And this is basically where the entire ego structure just dissolves. The entire ego, right, is seen through. The person, in a sense, is no longer stuck within identifying as a separate self. They don't experience themselves as being separate from nature anymore, from anyone or anything. They directly recognize reality as total oneness, total unity, pure consciousness. I'm going to have a video on this in the near future. And at this level, there's this deep understanding to really understand consciousness and the nature of one's own existence. Good examples of people like this are Peter Ralston, Adyashanti, Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, Rupert Spira, Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Peter Ralston. Did I mention Peter Ralston? Yeah, that's all I'm going to mention for now. Right? Ken Wilber. So that's it. That's all I'm going to mention for now. Those are all the examples. You can Google them. Those are examples of self-transcended people. That's it for this one. If you guys are interested in working with me one-to-one, you can apply to do that. Link is in the pinned comment and the description. Take it easy.